Welcome to another episode of Puncher's Chance. I'm your host, John Lodge, joined as always by Jordan Grenke. I'm coming to you from the Sports Lodge, and Jordan from Castle Grenke. And Jordan, we had quite the interesting fight night that happened, and we've got a stacked lineup here. We're going to get into the Overeem and Sakai card. We're going to get into the main event and the co-main. We have a change in the main event for ESPN Plus 35, which is the next fight night. And we have a Canadian who is going to be on the main card for the Covington Woodley fight night. So lots to talk about. But before we get into any of that, what's been up with you the last week?
Just Raptors.
I know you got kids and stuff, right? So,
just Raptors.
School.
Forget the kids. Just Raptors. That's all it's been. We're like redoing dinner time. Like, we had a family picnic in the middle of the living room just so we could watch the Raptors game and stuff like that. It's been Raptors fever for pretty much anyone I know. You know what it's like, Lodge, like the Toronto fan base, when things get going really well, everyone hops on board, and again, everything else is just kids going back to school and obviously tons of fights and tons of sports is coming back. We're a week away from football. Football's this week.
Yeah, football's in 2 days, man.
Yeah, man. Everything's starting to feel a little more normal, and I got to tell you what it does for your upstairs compartment there, the upstairs apartment. I think it's great. Feeling more normal always helps me enjoy things a lot better. So, yeah, just been getting used to feeling a little bit more normal.
Yeah, it helps people decompress, I find, right? When you have something you get lost into, whether it be your TV shows, being able to come back and continue filming, and you get to finish the seasons that were cut short, or it's fights or it's sports, etc. A little bit of normalcy is always good. It's funny how you brought up the Raptors and you said it's Raptors fever. I felt sick to my stomach last night, like I was, or like I had a fever or something, because holy goodness, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was fatigue, but the Raptors they were putting up so many bricks in that game. 11 points in the first quarter. It's really astounding, man. The Toronto Blue Jays put up 10 runs in an inning. They almost outscored the Toronto Raptors in one inning what the Raptors were able to put up in an entire quarter. So fever's an apropos word. Yeah. I was definitely feeling sick watching the Raptors, and hopefully game 6 where we want some better things, and maybe we'll see a little bit more of Matt Thomas. He seems to be able to put the ball in the net, and
right.
So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think we see anyone else off that bench other than Serge Ibaka and the guys were Norm Powell, the guys we're used to seeing. But if we're plugging in someone else, a little bit of an inside look to the Sports Lodge, I think it's Matt Thomas, who can maybe be your wing shooter, but he lacks on the defensive end. So you got to have someone who can make up for what he doesn't bring on the rim protection.
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. As far as basketball as a sport, I enjoy more than I can analyze properly. But it just kind of seemed a little flat-footed. It seemed like just like the easy shots. I mean, right away, like a couple of the layups, like just regular points that the Raptors are uncharacteristically not used to missing, weren't landing. And listen, Boston got their groove back, and they were shooting from the perimeter. They look like the more composed team. What I do know is that the Raptors, if they take a game off, they usually come back looking pretty good. I know that's obviously wishful thinking and somewhat biased, but I'm excited for it. And I'm just happy that they're back and that they're in the playoffs, and we're watching, super high level basketball. I mean, some of the stuff Nick Nurse has been doing with his defense, showing 5-6 different defensive looks per game. I love the strategy about it. But John, I'm getting a message here that I forgot to bring up, that the Detroit Lions actually signed Adrian Peterson, and I'm a huge Lions fan. So let's not skip over that for the intro either. All right. So just saying.
Yeah, well, there's a signing in New England that's pretty big too, but I
knew you were going to say it.
I'm keeping it low key, so until I see what's possible. But I will admit to putting a little bit of a wager down on some NFL futures for the
nice.
New England Patriots to win not only the AFC Championship, but to get that 7th ring that I've been after and win the Super Bowl. So
I'm not glad, man. Obviously, other than Tampa Bay, which is because there's so many literal moving parts at this point. I think that that the Patriots are going to be can't miss. I don't think anyone is going to not tune in, haters aside, for at least I would say the first 5 weeks. I think with the lack of a preseason, everyone's gonna have a shaky first couple weeks, but I think by week 5, week 6, I mean, it's just gonna be so much fun to watch. You know, my wife here is a Patriots fan, even though she's kind of a Tom Brady fan as well. But I think what's gonna be more interesting is just the fact that I've never been. I mean, I've always been polarized by the legacy and like the the dominance of the Patriots, but now I get to see the Patriots again for like the first time, and that really excites me. Like to see like a fresh look, to a certain degree, not totally fresh, but just to see a different New England Patriots. But on paper, they look to be just as dominant, if not more dominant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't say that they'll be as dominant, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see what New England does with a mobile quarterback when they haven't had it. And you talk about Tom Brady, you talk about Tampa Bay. I will take the side of a lot of people go to Florida to retire, and it seems like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the place where people are going. Leonard Fournette, Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady, Shady McCoy. The list goes on and on and on. All these old players that are kind of past their prime, in my opinion. All go into the retirement home that is Tampa Bay, and hopefully they can retire there and enjoy the nice, warm, sunny weather. And
I love it.
Maybe get 9 wins, but I don't see them really doing much. But that could just be, like I said, my little bit of bias.
I love it, man. I love the passion.
Moving on, talking about the fight game, man, we had a big fight night this past week. It was headlined by Overeem and Sakai. And Overeem, man, we're going to get into his fight second because there's a lot to talk about there. But the big man and the old men showing up strong in the co-main and main event. Ovince St. Peru is the co-main we're talking about, and he, as I look at my notes, he was taking on Alonzo Menafield.
Yeah.
And
Menafield,
Menafield was the betting favorite. Ovince came in at a plus 110, I believe, so a slight dog. And I guess it's the age and the fact that OSP he's struggled so much throughout his career in the UFC. Like, I was looking up his history, Jordan, and it astounds me because the way he knocked out Menafield, it was a nothing punch out of nowhere that shocked the hell out of me. And then I look at it, and he's got so many perfect KOs and whatnot on his record. But then in between those perfect KOs, there are stumbles, there are losses that you question why he was never able to get it done. Now, he fought for the interim title against John Jones, so you could say that he was in the light heavyweight division with the greats of Daniel Cormier, John Jones, Alex Gustafsson when he was pretty much at his highest, so on and so forth. But man, a guy like that just never really able to get it going. Will this be his stepping stone? I guess is the point I'm trying to make. Will OSP finally be able to step past this and maybe challenge for a strap and take one down?
You know what? I think Ovince St. Preux is a super talented guy and a really unique fighter. Very awkward, very difficult. The OSP fight with John Jones was less of a ladder step for OSP, and it was basically a last minute replacement for Daniel Cormier. I shouldn't say last minute. He was replacing Daniel Cormier due to injury and stuff like that. So I think Ovince St. Preux, he's been played with inconsistency. I think you nailed it on the head. He has unbelievably great performances and then performs under what his potential is. Sometimes being awkward makes you look like you have a worse performance than you do. What he caught Menafield with was eerily similar, not in the approach, but similar to the way he caught Shogun rushing in and then just a quick check hook, and it was Menafield was pushing the pace, and OSP looked like he was kind of getting outclassed for the first at least round. When he went back to his kicking attack, it opened back up and ultimately got him the win. I don't think this does much for OSP. I think, like we touched on last week, I think this was more of a prop-up fight for Menafield that didn't go the way the UFC wanted to. I still think OSP has likely a lot more work to do to. I don't think we see him have another shot.
Yeah, just too much inconsistency, right? And
yeah.
I mean, I can remember a few years back he had 2017 was when he put together a 3-fight win streak, right? And that was when last time I remember him being relevant. And not that he doesn't have the ability to just turn the lights out, because he did that to Menafield. But you have to be able to put together a little bit of a run, a little bit of consistency, and that's plagued him. So until he shows the ability to do that, and hey, we're looking at Alistair Overeem at 40 plus years old putting together a run right now, so it's not over for OSP. But like you said, lots of work to be done. Moving on to the main event, Alistair Overeem versus Sakai. Man, this was a slow fight. This was a very paced out fight. But before we get into it, I've just got a question about Sakai's body weight. Looked like he was carrying that water balloon in front, right? And it makes me question why they do that, because he's obviously in good enough shape that he doesn't need that. So is that just to make heavyweight? Because that can't be. I don't understand why you carry that. That can't be good for you.
It's strange because I've never really been able to put my finger on it for sure. I feel like some people have benefited from it, like Roy Nelson, maybe Mark Hunt to a certain degree, but they were big guys. Let's use Roy Nelson instead of Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt has to cut weight because his legs are tree trunks to get down to 265, which is the heavyweight limit. Roy Nelson would walk around 230, and you look at his gut and you're going like, if you just lost 30 pounds, you'd fight at 205, but he'd be kind of small for that weight class. So what I think it is, and the only thing that this is, again, totally my own opinion, and everyone's welcome to criticize it, but I think it is that the skill level between 205 and heavyweight has a bit of a gap there. And I think that guys who are heavyweights, you don't see a lot of, other than the Curtis Blades, right? You don't see a lot of like full-time wrestlers. So you can just rely on your striking. I feel like the less rounded you are, you might have more success, or at least a 5-6 fight career in the UFC if you are fighting up in heavyweight. Also, heavyweight is not a weight class that is youth driven. There are barely any heavyweights that are under the age of 30, let alone 35. So I think that maybe a guy like Augusto Sakai might be looking at it as, I might have a speed advantage because I'm smaller, I'll carry around this weight, or 2, I don't have to cut any weight, and 3, maybe I'm not as good on the ground as a lot of the 205ers are, guys like John Jones. Even if you go back and look at, the Bellator lightweights or light heavyweights might have more skill on the ground than some of the heavyweights we have, depending on who it is. So I think it's a combination of all that stuff. I think that overall you can get most bang for your buck skill wise at heavyweight, which is why I think some of these guys don't have to worry about their diet. Maybe can focus on your training. I mean, for Christ's sake, like Andy Ruiz won a heavyweight title by shocking the world, looking like he was the most out of shape person in the world. So I think it's partially work ethic, partially diet. But I think, again, you can kind of muddy the waters as to where your skill level is on the ground, unless you're fighting Curtis Blades, but he's one in what? Of the 30 heavyweights they have, he's the one guy that's more wrestling prone than everyone else. So I think it's a combination of that stuff. But I don't know. When you look at Alistair Overeem, you look at Augusto Sakai, it looks like one guy's in shape, but one guy's not.
Yeah, well, that's my point I was going to make, is with Curtis Blades, with Roy Nelson, the weight they had was an advantage to them because they could lay on you and place that weight in ways where it made you hard to move. The pouch that Sakai had wasn't going to do you any good like that. It was literally just, I don't know, maybe it was so he was comfortable, or he was too comfortable going into the fight. I don't know. Either way, getting into the fight, he landed a lot of offense in the first 3 rounds. Overeem's striking percentage, accuracy percentage, I should say, was much higher, but it was because Overeem wasn't throwing as many strikes. It reminded me, though, and excuse me for forgetting the champion's name, but it reminded me of the Aldo fight, when the champ gassed Aldo out for 3 rounds and then came back in the championship rounds and completely dominated. That looked exactly like what Overeem was doing with Sakai. He was just taking his shots where he was eating a lot of them. He was putting his hands up and he was guarding. Doesn't look good on the card, or doesn't look good to the judges, but he's taking a lot of the energy out of Sakai. So am I right in saying it was kind of similar?
Yep. So you're looking at what they call in most combat sports the rope-a-dope approach. And, Alistair Overeem, you've seen about 10 different versions of him. He used to be a guy that was exactly like Sakai, walk you across, right, be a little tentative, and then just start opening up huge strikes. Alistair Overeem has changed his fighting styles and camp so many times that he's so experienced. I think he looks at a guy like Sakai, looks at how he trains, looks at his physique, and realizes, I'm in better shape. Why not exploit that? Alistair Overeem is one of, if not the most accomplished striker in combat sports history. K1 Grand Prix winner, Strikeforce heavyweight champion, has beaten the who's who at heavyweight in the UFC. Has had this, this crazy awesome career. Pride champ or Pride. He was fighting Pride. He's seen it all. What he's doing is conserving his own energy while allowing his opponent, who really is looking to make a name as the guy who stops Alistair Overeem, right? And is conserving and using his energy wisely. And we started seeing this approach more or less after his back-to-back losses from Travis Brown and Antonio Bigfoot Silva, is that he had to just change how he was, right? For a variety of reasons. But it is designed to tire the opponent out and zapping some of that initial first couple round, and you could see it. He was so tentative from the start, and then, countering low kicks and adding some damage, that residual damage that would happen later in the fight. But absolutely, John, it was 100% designed that way. That's part of the game plan. And my God, did it look good by the fourth round.
Yeah, it really did. The DC and I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting the other play-by-play, but DC was making note of the fact that they were talking about how Sakai was the fresher fighter, and Sakai's corner said, "We're the fresher fighter," and that was at the start of round 3. Well,
Yeah.
then at that round was when Overeem had his first takedown, right? And then Sakai had to defend the takedown. And at the start of round 4, all of a sudden, it was Overeem who was the fresher fighter. And we had 3 takedowns total, all the exact same single leg rolling takedown. And Overeem was able to dominate all 3 times. So his wrestling, his striking, everything is coming to fruition again in ways that we're used to seeing. But for a man his age, for a 40 plus year old fighter, are we seeing finally a title path for Alistair Overeem? And could we possibly see another heavyweight fighter win the title and then retire?
I love Alistair Overeem. I mean, I feel like I've been watching him since I was a kid, and I've enjoyed it, forever. Maybe. I mean, he had a lot of success against Stipe. And, it was unfortunate the way he was on the ground and he was taking those shots. I mean, he dropped Stipe. He's a very good striker. His fight IQ is great. If his physicality and his attributes as an athlete can hold up, he's beaten everyone else, right? He sounds like he wants Derek Lewis next. And, I just worry about, it's similar to what Daniel Cormier was saying, is that when he was in there with Stipe, even the 38-year-old version of Daniel would have been a little bit quicker, would have been a little sharper, and like Father Time is undefeated. And I think that Alistair Overeem is still going to be a top 5 heavyweight at 40 years old. I don't know if he's going to have the reflex, the twitch muscle ability, and the overall quickness he's going to need to best, a Stipe Miocic or. But again, we just talked about it with Augusto Sakai. Like it's not a young division, so it's not like there's some 20-year-old killer with pecs on top of pecs on top of shoulders that's coming after him, right? So I think that he has a good chance. I just don't see him beating Stipe. I think Stipe is really well rounded, and no one really is going to want to see him fight Ngannou again because Ngannou nearly decapitated him. So I feel like with the guard that's there at the top, unfortunately, even though I have a soft spot for any of the old guard, I don't see him getting back there. And then if you add John Jones to the mix, if he goes up to heavyweight, that's trouble too. I think we're going to see, I think there's some interesting fights for Overeem. I don't think we see him with a belt.
See, pardon me. The last fight we saw with Sakai. Am I wrong in saying that the body type, not the fighting style, not the experience, not the challenge, but the body type, Stipe and Sakai are kind of the same, right? Now Stipe's in much better shape, but
Yeah.
height and just overall body composition, right?
Speed as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ngannou was or not Ngannou, sorry, you got me talking Ngannou, but Alistair was able to take him down. DC went for the takedown against Stipe, but he realized quickly that he had to abandon that. DC's a much smaller man than Overeem. My question here is can Overeem then take advantage of that in a match? Say if he does get there against Stipe, does he just like he can obviously stand, but he showed he can take you down and he can wrestle. Do we finally see that Stipe have to go up against someone like that and let's see some wrestling? I know that he's done it in the past, but I still see a fight there. I see some interest there.
Mhm.
Obviously, a lot of work to be done by Alistair. You got to start by beating Derek Lewis, but you can work your way up. I know that Bones is there, and I know that you have Ngannou and other challengers there, but leave that to Stipe. If he can knock
Yeah.
those down, then by beating those guys, you automatically move up because Stipe's knocked them down, right? So you take on the challenges you have now and build it. I still see it like he's a freak in nature, man. He's won fights in 4 decades.
Yeah.
I think that I'd love to see him there. One of the classiest fighters in the UFC.
Yeah.
Like ever. 2 things before we get out of the Overeem talk, because I want to transition into other heavyweights.
Oh yeah.
One, his kicks seemed a little low in this fight, and I wonder if that's because he couldn't get his leg up as high as he would like. And 2, I have never seen someone ground and pound the crap out of someone like that and then immediately brush past the referee and make sure he's okay. That you normally see guys are hyped up and shouting and cheering and everything, but the first thought for Overeem was, I've got to make sure this guy's okay, because the fight probably should have been stopped at the end of the 4th round.
Yeah. Stoppages have become a big fun topic lately. I think that 10 years ago, that's not the Alistair Overeem you see. I think you've seen him like he likes to, kind of stand up and flex. And I think when someone who's seen everything that he has such a deep respect for being a fighter. He's been through a lot, personally and through his career. I think that he is just, it was pure class. I loved seeing that, I like a good celebration, but I think it's nice when you can be like, hey man, that was a hell of a fight. Like, I loved it. So I think you're everyone keeps talking about Alistair Overeem 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0. This version of Alistair Overeem is a lot of fun. And I think that it's a culmination of everything that he's learned. And he's just showing you what a veteran he is, both with his skills and his mindset.
Yeah, and the kicks. Did you have a thought on his kicks?
I think it was game plan. I think that again, you talk about body type. If you look at Sakai's legs, like he's not a gangly sort of long leg guy. I think that with the amount of times that he was doing calf kicks and body kicks, I think again, and with your theory on the game plan, which I think is solid, I think the idea was to get him tired and get him down. Let him work, let him miss. Even the way he was covering up was basically almost no danger. Like you'd have to maybe clip him on the ear, but nothing that was going to chin him or get him out of there too quickly. And a good athlete can recover well, and he's at Team Elevation, and they focus a lot on conditioning as well. So I think it was designed. There were a lot of lower kicks, but I think that it was aiming. He was landing knees, although they were getting him reversed. But you just see a lot of the low blows I hate, right? But you could see that he was targeting the body, and I think it's a symptom of going to that area so many times. There's 2 people moving around trying to kick your midsection. You're going to get it low a few times. I don't think he's the kind of fighter who would do it intentionally. But yeah, I think it was part of the game plan.
And I know I said that was the final point from this fight, but if this fight had gone to the cards, this is my last question. Sakai was grabbing the fence a lot, like a lot of leniency from Herb Dean on this fight with the fence grabs. Yeah. And it wasn't just the cage interlocking his fingers. He was grabbing on top and holding onto the padding while trying to pin Overeem to the cage. So could that have affected the scoring?
I don't know. It certainly would if you got a point taken away. And, Herb Dean is tolerant of most things, but you might get a ref like Mark Goddard or even Dan Mergliotti who will be like, I'm not dealing with that. I mean, you just don't like to see it. Like it's not, I hate being the person who's like, that's cheating, but like you don't train to do that. It's desperation. And sometimes it's instinctual. So, but I mean, at this day and age, people have been fence grabbing for like 25 years. Like we got to put an end to it. So I don't like to see it. But I think that had there been a point deduction, you would have looked at a very different score. I don't think the judges are that well versed. They would take a mental note of it and then take a scoring down. But I felt like Herb Dean was one warning away from being like, I'm taking a point, because some of them were really bad.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like you said, sometimes it's just out of instinct, but it was so many times, so
Yeah.
many warnings to me. I was just like, okay, well, like we need to stop. Like there needs to be a point. There needs to be some sort of at least a warning, right? And I just figured
Yeah.
I feel Herb was a little bit lenient in that one. But moving on,
Yep.
we talked about Stipe, we've talked about Derek Lewis, we've talked about Overeem, and it just seems to be keep growing. John Bones Jones, Francis Ngannou, all the names keep piling up, and the heavyweight picture in at least in the title picture, it seems to be getting crowded. You talked about the cap keeping Overeem down, but I mean, there's a lot of guys who are looking to challenge Miocic for that belt, and now Miocic comes out and throws a monkey wrench
Oh
into
yeah.
everything, Jordan, into everything, and says,
What was he
"Oh,
thinking?
what if I want Brock? What if I want Brock?" So,
Never crossed
yeah,
my mind. Never
like,
crossed my mind. If you go back to the last episode where we're going through all the different scenarios, not once did either of us even contemplate the idea of Miocic versus Lesnar. In a way, I just felt like he's not worried about money fights. He's worried about, like, legacy, having the record. And we kind of look at him as like a GSP versus, like, a John Jones or a Brock Lesnar who's looking for like those showcase fights. So, I mean, I just love the idea that he put it out there. I think that he's made a lot of mistakes sometimes in the PR side, but this one was not one of them.
yeah, no, definitely not. This Stipe, I mean, the Stipe we've seen since the finish with DC, not the Stipe leading up to it, because, like I said, we had a little bit of problem with him,
Mm-hmm.
with a couple of things he was saying about the fights with DC and whatnot. But the DC or not the DC, the Stipe we've seen post fight. I mean, he's fun. He's laughing. He's just he's different, and he's a media darling almost. It's really
Yeah.
interesting to see what he's been able to do, and this is perfect. I don't know if this was a PR move. If someone was like, "Hey, man, you should bring up Brock Lesnar," but a brilliant move by Stipe, and I can't say I wouldn't want to see it, but I can tell you, you've said it to me, and I agree. I do not think Brock Lesnar wants anything to do with Stipe Miocic. He just wants that money. And it's funny that everyone is talking Bones and Lesnar, because if you just want that money, then you don't want to be going up against John Bones Jones either, because for what we know, he's just as competitive, just as strong, just as dangerous as any fighter has ever been in the octagon.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's strange to me, all the Brock Lesnar talk, but DC on DC and Helwani, I think he made a challenge. I don't know if you heard it, but I,
I
I
did.
think
Yeah.
I think he made a challenge for WrestleMania for Brock Lesnar, and with Ariel in his corner, with Paul
Could be
Heyman in
good.
Brock Lesnar's corner.
Oh
I could
yeah.
see that happening, man. And I honestly thought that we were going to see DC at the last, or not this past WrestleMania, but the WrestleMania previous,
Mm-hmm.
when we had fans there, and he didn't show up. Obviously, he was still busy with the UFC. But now that we know that's completely over, I can't say I don't want to see Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Cormier at WrestleMania.
That would be cool. Unfortunately, if for people that are really into wrestling, you kind of know that maybe DC gets by on his natural ability a little bit, but there is a whole art form and skill around, being able to communicate in the ring and the cues and like and the it's a whole it really like professional wrestling is an art form in itself. I think Daniel Cormier is built for it. I love it. I think it'd be a ton of fun. I mean, I would would watch. Like I absolutely would watch that. But last week I was all hyped up on the whole Brock Lesnar thing. It's kind of waned off a little bit. I think it's interesting how everything's been very quiet in the John Jones camp, including like other than when he posts about his dog training stuff. Not a lot of fight talk, even though there's been fights on, right? But the John Jones conversation is happening. This is just the recipe where something's happening behind closed doors. I feel like Brock is just leveraging us against WWE, or is bound to do something else. I don't think we see Lesnar back in the octagon as much as we wish it could, but I think we're likely going to see a John Jones announcement in the next week or so in regards to what his plans are. because the table has been set. But I gotta admit, like as the fanboy in me, I've kind of weaned off the Brock Lesnar hype a little bit. I know we still have a couple weeks more of questions about it, but I still am in the camp that like we don't see Lesnar do a fight camp at another fight uh, in the UFC.
Well, I mean, while I tend to agree, Brock Lesnar is a guy who keeps himself at a level of physical like competitiveness and
Mm-hmm.
physical shape where not that you don't have to go through a grueling fight camp, but he wouldn't have to go through much. And the last time we seen Brock Lesnar was 4 months ago, well before the COVID, or well just at the beginning of the COVID crisis at WrestleMania for like a 5-minute match, and then he flew back home to Manitoba and or wherever, I believe it's Manitoba,
So
and he's been there ever since. So he's a farmer. He's a cattle farmer, which is really funny when you think of it.
yeah,
Dan Henderson's a plumber. Stipe Miocic is a fireman.
firefighter.
You
Yeah,
got you got the cow farmer and Brock Lesnar. I mean, are we like? I said to my sister, and no disrespect intended, but I firmly believe you could put together a village people in the UFC,
you could. Yeah,
with all the
yeah,
jobs that these guys occupy. Yeah, and it's funny because you think, professional athlete, this is all they do, this is all they've ever done, but then when you actually go look into their history, fighting wasn't that lucrative. You had to have a job. Different for Brock Lesnar, he does it because he
sure.
loves it and he grew up with it. But we're talking about these other guys. They had to have another form of income, another source of revenue, because fighting just wasn't going to do it for them. So it almost endears fighters to me more when I talk about stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting to side note to think about that. So yeah, Brock Lesnar sitting on his farm lifting cows. That's what I'm picturing. He's just going to deadlift cows.
Oh yeah, and just his big bags of money, like just the amount, all the stuff that he's done. I mean, yeah, the guy has been pretty good with his money. You don't see him spending a lot of stuff. Seems like he's a pretty simple guy, likes to hunt, likes to do that kind of stuff, and he's always going to be a polarizing guy. I mean, he could do anything he wanted to, really. But I think athletically, when you reach your mid 40s, it's kind of you hit your peak, and I don't want to see him get busted up. I think when he came back for UFC 200, he wanted to test himself. It was more based on the fact that the diverticulitis that he had really debilitated his ability to perform. But he's so goddamn tough that he just was fighting Alistair Overeem, Cain Velasquez, like all these people that like were, for a guy that had, how many feet of his intestines removed, like he's a
Yeah, he almost
toughest.
died. That was
Yeah,
serious.
literally almost died. So I think that whatever he chooses to do, like, good for him. I just don't think that at 40, I don't know, what is he, 43?
Yeah, he's mid 40s. I don't know exactly. It's 43, 44, something like that.
If he wants to come back and test himself against John Jones and have one of those big, like Conor McGregor, big kind of fights, Brock Lesnar is just the same as Conor in the sense that, like, you need an audience. Like, you're not going to have Brock Lesnar fight until COVID-19 is over. And if that's a year away and he's 44, I mean, he's got to go back in the USADA testing pool. That's a 4-month process. And I just don't think it's reasonable. And again, if he wants to, he's going to, and he's going to have a lot of name recognition and people that are after that want to fight him for the money. But I mean, at some point, the guy has done so much athletically in his career. Like, I think maybe, I mean, even me personally, I'm kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna just back off this a little bit and like appreciate that we were alive in the time of Brock Lesnar when he was world beating in 2 professional sports.
Yeah. I mean, I think if he comes back, it's for the money, and it's one
Yeah.
fight, and
Yeah.
it's to increase his value with the WWE, right? It's like
Mhm.
right now it's maybe Brock Lesnar's popularity is waning a little bit, and he feels that, and he knows it, and he's like, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to reinvent myself yet again, go back to the UFC, make a couple $1 million on a pay-per-view fight with so and so, whoever it is. If like, I don't think it's any serious title contender other than Bones.
Mhm.
I think honestly, he would have loved to have fought Cormier after Stipe in the
Yeah.
octagon. I really think that would have been the ideal thing for Brock. But aside from that, that's the process I see it here. I don't see him re-signing with WWE until he fights somewhere else to raise his name
Mhm.
value again, to get the money that he wants. Because, like you said, man, he's got a big old stockpile. He's got Brinks truck after Brinks truck parked at
Yeah.
that parked on that ranch. So there's no real need for it, other than if the money is so enticing that you have to take it, right? So
Right.
interesting with Brock Lesnar. Moving on to future events with the UFC, we've talked about the headliner having to being changed for ESPN plus
Mm-hmm.
35, which is the next fight night. It's the new way they're naming fight nights because since they've been on ESPN Plus. And it's Michelle Waterson is going up against, as I stumble along with my words, Angela Overkill Hill. And the reason this is such a big deal, Jordan, and I have questions regarding this. The reason this is such a big deal is because for the first time in UFC history, we're talking hundreds of
Yeah.
UFCs, over 150 fight nights, tons of pay-per-views. The first time in UFC history, a American black woman is headlining a fight card against Michelle Waterson. Why is this happening just now?
It's I hate to say it, but it didn't really dawn on me until it you kind of pointed out to me. I went, nah, wait, I'm thinking to myself, like, how many fights have I watched? And I don't know if it's a talent thing. I don't know if it's it's tough to say. It really got me thinking though. I will tell you that I absolutely took a step back and thought to myself, this can't be correct. But I mean, from all accounts and purposes, I can't see any different anything different or anything that challenges that. But I don't know if I mean, when I look at all, so what I started doing is start digging the other organizations. So I'm looking at ONE FC, I'm looking at, the PFL, and I'm looking especially in Invicta, where they have the majority, all their fighters are women in Invicta. And they've had a lot of success, and they've been one of the, if not the biggest, like, proponents of female MMA. Same with Strikeforce. The roster is lacking in the African American base, and I don't know why that is. I'm not sure if it's selective, and if it is, well, there's a lot of questions there. But if it's just that, if it's a natural sort of sociological, that it's not appealing to that demographic, I'm not sure. But it definitely made me take a step back and say, like, this is 2020 we're talking about here. Like, how has this not happened before? But it could be multiple truths.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there's any nefarious means
Yeah.
behind it. Personally, female MMA has only been a mainstream thing. Like, Ronda Rousey created the division, the bantamweight division, right,
Yeah.
for the
Not that many years
UFC,
ago. Yeah.
and not that many years ago. So I'll chalk it up, as much as I love playing devil's advocate and
Mhm.
bringing the question and bringing the heat. I'll just chalk it up to the fact that it hasn't been around long enough in North America. Okay,
Right.
so fighting is huge over in Brazil
Yep.
and in Europe, and so like the Amanda Nunes's of the world and so on and so forth. They've been training in jujitsu and whatnot for a very long time. So maybe it just hasn't fostered enough growth in North America yet, where we haven't seen it. And this is the beginning of a new phase, of a good thing. And hell, maybe maybe Angela Hill is the person to be that name, to
Absolutely.
start a fan base, right? To bring more African American female fighters into the UFC, into Invicta, into the world of mixed martial arts. So I just wanted to shine a little bit of a light on that. But talking
Yeah,
about
for sure.
the fight, looking at, I believe Waterson is 17-8, and Angela Hill is 12-8 or 13-8. Does Angela have a chance against a legitimate contender in Michelle Waterson?
I'll tell you, Angela Hill has been one of the most interesting experiments that I've seen inside of the octagon. And I say that she has just absolute raw talent, like, tough as can be, quick, agile, unbelievably athletic, right? All the attributes you want. But when she came into the UFC, and I believe, if I'm not, I should have looked this up ahead of time, but I believe she was the first African American female in the UFC as well, which means that should she get to title contention, she'd definitely be the first African American um, female champion if that was the case. But she came in as kind of like pure raw talent, like, just kind of like Paige Van Zant was, very athletic. But Angela Hill has put it all together lately. And she never looks like she's out of the fight. She doesn't get stopped all the time. She just loses. She started her career side of kind of basically losing fights, but was very competitive. And I almost attribute it to, you see this in different careers as well. Well, like even somebody who makes big career turnarounds, like Robbie Lawler, was losing a lot of fights, something to then just switched. And we watched him grow through the UFC as well. But what I love about Angela Hill, sorry, is that she is unbelievably relentless. Like losses, she arguably looks better after every loss. Now, when I say these losses, I'm talking like when she was 2-0, she goes up against Tisha Torres, was one of the best in the world, and then Rose Namajunas. Like she has been fighting the best. Right? Her losses are to people who are really, really good, like your top 10, top 5. She's got a loss to Jessica Andrade, a decision. She didn't get finished by Andrade, right? She loses, she wins by TKO. She wins by KO, right? She did get choked out by Rose, but Rose was way better on the ground from the very beginning, right? She loses or wins a lot of decisions, right? I know Ronda Marcos caught her with an armbar, but that was just a high-level technique. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is I believe she won against Claudia Gadelha in her last fight. What I love is that the UFC kind of agrees because now she's main eventing against Michelle Waterson. But if you look at her last 4 or 5 fights, she's gone from eking out a decision to like finishing people. Like she finished Ariane Kamalasi. She finished Hannah Cyphers. She looked phenomenal against Loma Lookboonmee. But like she's putting it all together, and you're seeing in real time someone who was raw talent that is now becoming a complete fighter. I not only think that she has a great chance to continue to improve, I think she gets through Michelle Waterson and in a pretty easy one-sided decision.
Ooh, a little bit of fire coming from Jordan.
Yeah,
We got
I love it. I love her. I think she's great.
I'm never one to disagree with your opinions, especially when you get so in depth with the
You're a smart man,
profiles
John Lodge.
with the profiles of the fighters. I know a lot. Well, I mean, I've watched a lot of Michelle Waterson, and I've counted her out a couple times when I shouldn't have. So it's definitely going to be a tough opponent for as I forget her name again, for Angela. But I mean, you think she can do it in a one-sided fight? I'm definitely going to be watching. I'm definitely going to be paying
Yeah.
attention. Moving on, we're going to talk about another card in the future. We've got a Canadian boy who's going to be fighting on the next one of the next upcoming cards, the Covington and Woodley card. It's as I stumble through how I'm going to talk about TJ Laramie here. You brought him up to me in the discussions for this episode when we go back and forth in texts, and you turned me on to his fights and told me how good his fight was for the Dana White Contender Series. So I took a look at it, and then I took a look at his highlights, and man,
yeah.
Before we get into the topic, before we get into talking about TJ, what is with these flyweights and featherweights, man? They throw like they're heavyweights. They're throwing their knuckles around and they're knocking people out. It's insane. They literally weigh as much as a matchstick, and they're knocking people out.
It's been the evolution. I think what you've seen is people who were smaller for weight classes that didn't have their own division. And that now you're seeing people who are able to form their own skill set in their own division, be comfortable at that weight, and not have, Demetrius Johnson used to fight at 155. Like he's 30 pounds up, and look how he does it in 125. But you got to get used to being in those divisions and expanding on your skills in those weight classes to really understand your power. And if you look at TJ Laramie and you look at guys like Alexander Volkanovski, like they are very similar body styles, very similar skill sets. There's little meticulous differences and idiosyncrasies that they both have and what makes them great and uniquely great. But you're seeing these lower weight classes become comfortable with their power. I mean, we saw it with Conor at 145. You saw Max as more of a volume guy. Brian Ortega hits hard. The Korean Zombie hits hard. Jose Aldo hits like a truck. You're seeing this stuff, and people develop. Cody Garbrandt, Sean O'Malley. Like these people are lower weight classes that have found their techniques and know how to properly use that power. And you're seeing those lighter weight divisions evolve naturally and aren't just based on speed and skill anymore. There's power for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you've said more than once on the show, on previous shows that the cards used to be created by the weight class, right? So you'd never see a lighter weight fight headlining, and the first time it happened was a Conor McGregor fight,
Mhm.
and I mean, if guys like TJ, and I mean, I know I'm putting the cart before the horse here, so we'll get into talking about his career, but if guys in the same weight class as TJ can be throwing knuckles like that and being exciting and making knockouts, man, I want to see that in the main event. I want to see
Yeah.
that in the co-main event because they're putting it all out there, and it's really exciting. It's something that I wouldn't have expected as a layman sports or layman's fighting fan getting into this, that the smaller guys would be able to pack so much power. But when you think about it, you bring science into it. Why isn't Ant so strong? Because its muscle strength to body weight is massive. So it just kind of makes sense that these smaller guys who are all muscle and all tone are going to be able to pack such a punch that it's explosive.
You know what? And I think you nailed everything that I could possibly say about it right there, Lodge. I mean, they're just that you're seeing an unbelievable work ethic and an ability to just like cardio is almost expected when you're at that weight class. So you get the chance to focus on so many other skills. And we are half of our mission statement when we first started doing this was to try and highlight some Canadian talent, and we've been just absolutely blessed with it. From Tanner Boser to talking about TJ Laramie right now. Like it used to be George St. Pierre and Rory McDonald that just carried this whole thing, but now we're seeing kind of the ebbs and the flows, right? We take a few years off, you don't really hear too much from the Canadians, and now you're just getting a huge influx in talent across many weight divisions. So, I mean, the fact that we're going to get maybe 5 to 7 years of TJ Laramie fighting in the UFC, I think he has the absolute potential, all the skill set. I know he has the work ethic. So nothing but good things that everyone that I know in the MMA community in Canada, not that there's that many people, but the people I do know all speak super highly of him, that he outworks most guys. He spent time at Team Alpha Male, right? He's a guy that is constantly going out and looking to expand on his skill set. And this is exciting. I can't wait to see him under the bright lights. Great card to have him on. And we will work our butt off to get him on the show. And I couldn't be more excited for a guy in an already exciting weight class.
Talk about a Fred and Barney pairing. Tanner
Mm.
Boser and TJ Laramie, right? Just when you brought that up, I just thinking it's just like, man, a giant man and then a small man, but both very, very dangerous, high competitive Canadian fighters. And
Yeah.
then we've got competitive fighting on the female side for Canada as well. So a lot of exciting fights coming up in the future for
Yeah.
the
Speaking of Flintstones, Randa Marcos has red hair. So that fits it perfectly. You got Fred, Barney, and Wilma.
There you go. It fits right into the analogy. I guess the point I'm getting at there is it's just really exciting to think about the future of Canadian MMA and the spotlight that could be coming
Mm-hmm.
to this country just based on the talent that we're able or that the country's able to produce on a world stage. I took a look at TJ's highlight reel, and and I took a look at his opponent's past, and they're both very fresh, very new. TJ's making his UFC debut. As much as he's fought in the Contender Series, this is the
Yeah.
first UFC fight he's technically had. And his opponent, Derek Minner,
Mm-hmm.
he lost via rear naked choke in the third round to Grant Dawson
Right.
in his
Dawson.
UFC debut on the Benavidez Figueiredo card on the 29th of February. And I was looking at TJ's highlight reel and noticed he's very, very good on the mat as well as good on the feet. So
Really
is
good
this
on
a
the mat.
strategy we could possibly see TJ employ with the fact that his opponent has already lost on the mat? Do we see TJ attack that?
You know what's crazy is that I would love to say, yeah, that the easy path to victory is going by someone else's, like the way they got caught last time. Problem is, most fighters will likely get in the gym the next day and say, how did I get caught that way? We've got to improve that other area. I think TJ is so well rounded that he can find a multitude of ways to win this fight. I think if he wants it on the ground, I think he's going to dictate the pace. And I think it's going to be TJ that ultimately decides where the fight goes. So I think that it's one of the many options he has, but I think you're just going to see a guy who's younger, a little fresher, and a more well-rounded, complete game. Not taking anything away from Derek Minner. I think it's good matchmaking. It's good to see where Derek Minner, where he's going to land coming off of his loss. But I think the hunger, just the way people talk about TJ, the fact that he's so hungry, so focused, 24/7. I mean, even in COVID, he's out on his front lawn and front driveway in Windsor, shadow boxing with like, his family members, anyone that'll hold mitts for him. Like, just, it's nonstop. And I'm not saying that there isn't that way for Minner, but I just think that it's TJ's time. And but the rear naked choke will be there if he wants to be there. If he gets the fight to the ground, TJ could keep it standing, and TJ could chop off his legs. It's going to be whatever he wants. I think it's going to be a really good fight for him.
Yeah, you bring up the leg kick, and that was another thing that was apparent in his hype video, his 3-minute video that I got to watch. Vicious with the leg kick, so much so that one of his opponents actually fell over after one of the leg kicks. So something to look out for. Just a well-rounded fighter, and another Canadian fighter, like we said, that we're looking to showcase and we're looking to lift up and hopefully get people to talk about, whether it's just here in our local fan or a local market, or if it's people watching wherever you're watching in the world. The fight game is worldwide. So yeah, TJ, we're talking to you, and we're looking at you. Hopefully that you can carry that Canadian flag into the octagon on that card. And it's interesting as I cough. A lot of Canadian fighters making it on the main card, right? You'd think that, no offense to TJ, you'd think it would be on the pre-fight card, but this is the amount of respect that UFC has for him and what they've seen in his growth so far. Like you said, they've been growing him throughout the years, that they're going to just go ahead and put him right on the main card because they're sure that this is going to be a must-see fight.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think he's got the style. The UFC is no fools. Not their first day. They see the talent. They know what they're going to be in for. They matched him up with a guy who's willing to bang with him as well. So I think it's going to be a fun fight. It might be a breakout performance. I don't know. Can get jittery sometimes, but I think you're going to see a good version of TJ Laramie, and I think he gets the W.
All right, well, that's all we got for this week's episode of the Puncher's Chance podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening and everyone for supporting us. We're on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter as well, or at John Lodge Music. And Jordan, if you want to hit him with your social.
Yeah, I'm just follow John and you'll get connected with me. I don't even know what my handles are. All I do is watch
believe
fights.
It's at Jordan Granke. I don't know for sure.
There you go.
But
it's probably changed. I've probably changed it 10 times since then.
Yeah,
who knows?
You're one of the most difficult people to tag in anything in the existence of social media.
I don't want to be known.
But if you want to get in touch with Jordan, just get a hold of me.
Through John.
I'll hook you up. But thanks everyone for joining us again on this episode of the Puncher's Chance podcast, and we'll see you next week with all of the updates on future fights and highlights on past fights. Thanks again for everyone for joining us.
Enjoy the fights, everybody.
Peace.